This is your Daily 5 for Thursday, April 9th, 2026. Today's review is from a show perspective, kind of a weird one because technically it's a re-review. It's a movie I talked about back in 2019 on the main show. However, I never did a 5-minute review of it, so in terms of a short spoiler-free review, it's not a re-review, so it both is and isn't. It's Schrodinger's Review. And the movie I'm talking about is 1987's Delirium, which again I talked about in the main show back in 2019. And I knew that this was going to be the follow-up to Nothing Underneath because there's an overlap in terms of they both revolve around a fashion component. And I hadn't watched Delirium since I reviewed it 7 years ago, and I was curious how it was going to hold up because Lando and I were both really impressed with Nothing Underneath. And so I thought, oh boy, is that going to change how I feel about this movie? And I think it has to a degree. So it's still a movie that at least I know I would, and I think Lando's going to say the same thing, that I think we would both recommend people watch, but Nothing Underneath has made the critical flaw that Delirium has harder to ignore. And that specifically, without giving anything away, is the killer reveal, and more importantly, the killer's motivation. One of the things that really blew me away, in particular about Nothing Underneath, is the fact that I empathized with the killer. Not what the killer did after, but the inciting incident is one I felt was very relatable. I understood it, and so it really changed my attachment to the character and gave the character kind of a tragic note. In Delirium, which from a filmmaking perspective is great. It's actually, I think, filmed from again, purely visual. I think it's actually a better made movie than Nothing Underneath in terms of its artistic vision, some of the things it does, some of the choices it makes. I think it's more striking in many ways and better made. But then you get to the reveal of the killer and the killer's motivation in the last 6-7 minutes of the film. And all of the reasoning that's given is basically blasted out in that very short time frame. And the movie prior does very little to give you an understanding of that motivation. So this time, watching it the second time because I knew who the killer was, I was paying attention to see if the movie was kind of teasing out things that if you were paying attention, you might pick up on. And it does at times, but barely, not enough. And so once you get to the ending and the killer is revealed and then explains why they're doing what they're doing, you feel like, oh, okay, well, this could have been anybody then because there's nothing of this in the rest of the movie that really has me understanding why we're where we are. So it could have been any of the characters in the movie that could have blurted out a similar motivation outside of one or two details, and it would have been every bit as impactful because we saw almost nothing of it. And that's the biggest problem Delirium has, is if you're going in, and see, Lando and I are very different this way. I tend to forgive more problems in the narrative because if the visuals are really good, I kind of will overlook the problems. And for Lando, it's the opposite. The narrative, if it's got a defect, it's going to be harder for him to overlook. Although I think he's going to agree that it's worth seeing, that defect is harder for him to overlook. And so that's really going to be the crux of the thing for most people. If you've never seen this movie and you were interested in it, just understand, if I was going to recommend anything, and I'll repeat this, I'm sure, on Friday, I would watch this before I'd watch Nothing Underneath. I think they make a great pairing, but I would watch this one first so that you're more impressed with what Nothing Underneath managed to do. And if I had known how good the previous movie would have been, that's the order we would have watched them in. So I will say, I still think Delirium is worth watching. I still think it does a lot of really good things filmmaking-wise. But, and look, Italian films, they're not strangers to out-of-nowhere reveals of killers, but the best ones know how to do it in a way where you don't feel like it's a cheat. And Delirium comes very close to the line where you're just kind of, you're going to groan at it. It's not completely out of nowhere, but it definitely should have been set up a little bit more throughout the movie. And that's really its biggest problem. Outside of that, I would still recommend it. I still think it is an entertaining movie. I think Lando's going to say the same thing. So it's not where either of us is going to say this is a bad movie. But again, having seen Nothing Underneath, the flaw that Delirium has, which unfortunately is at the very end, is harder to ignore. I would still recommend it. Still think it's worth watching. Just understand that it's got one problem, and how much you're going to be able to ignore it is going to depend on you. Later.